And we're live.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of Cool Story Bro. Today, I'm the host for you, Moritz Bierling, and I have with me today Michael, Nick, Lynn, Emil, today talk about the topic of forging your own path. We started last week with the topic of awareness, and awareness has sort of this very primal association for me. It's something that you can cultivate. We talked a lot about how different traditions and disciplines like martial arts can hone your awareness, and how awareness is a basis on which you can construct a sort of a feedback loop and a system and a way that you can engage with the world overall. And today we're sort of taking this a bit further into what do you do when you develop awareness, and how do you actually take this into creating a life that you find worth living. In particular, we want to touch on the topics of education, particularly self-directed education, as well as building your own career, perhaps your own job. And so the subjects that we can touch on here are many, but we basically want to talk about, okay, you start somewhere, how do you get to where you want to go? And so I thought I'll start off with my own story and why this topic matters to me, which is that like many young people, I feel like at the very beginning of my sort of adult life after school finished, didn't really know what to do, had a very hard time figuring out where I should go. Obviously, back then I thought, obviously the smart people go to university, they have to, otherwise they do anything worthwhile, and struggled to find a worthwhile subject, applied to many different things, got into one thing, philosophy of economics, and then dropped out nearly immediately after one semester, after realizing it was far too theoretical for me, even though I love to do philosophy and economics and think about stuff. That tendency can lead to actually withdrawing inside far too much to my liking. And actually, I read this book, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, that really brought home the point for me that a life worth living is not just thinking about stuff, it's also doing things. And that if you only learn from theory, if you only learn from professors and sort of passively, your knowledge doesn't have much meaning, and it's not very ethical also to then end up in positions of power where you make decisions that can negatively impact a lot of people if you don't yourself have skin in the game and have actually vetted your ideas in the real world, rather than only having them from sort of receive them secondhand. And so that really stuck with me, that sort of deep appreciation for embodied and tacit knowledge. And I ended up going to a different study program, dual study program this time, working and studying at the same time, dropped out of that after 10 months, and then went to Chile to participate in an entrepreneurship boot camp. And basically since then, I've not looked back. I've sort of existed in this weird space outside of conventional ways of creating a career, similar to how Nick was saying. Like at some point, he just hit this point of I can't go back to thinking the conventional way anymore. And even though family, friends, college, country disapproved of that, I ended up finding a way to make it work. And so since then, I've organized an AI conference, a Space Invader bootcamp, the world's first Ethereum developer training, among a whole host of other things. And now at the point where I'm actually ramping up my own business, consulting other people who have very powerful ideas on how to bring those to more people. And so that's sort of the very short version of my little story, and why I think forging your own path is a subject worth discussing. And with that, I want to open it up to everybody else. And what do you guys think about forging your own path? Have you yourself struggled with that? How do you think about approaching that? Do you have any advice as well?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, I guess. And when you say forging your own path, I mean, I guess we're always doing that, whether we're aware of it or not, right? So it's like, it's just what path are you following, and how much diverging from what consensus is doing or what everyone else is doing. So like, yeah, I went to university like all my friends, and I got a job like everyone else. And I felt like I was forging my own path because, I had chose my job interviews, and I chose my countries, even I moved countries. So I was, going down the path, and then just wasn't very super fulfilled or happy, like you said, at some point, kind of questioning, is this it? Like, I think I had a new job every 6 months or something. Like I was just climbing up the corporate ladder super fast and getting paid very well, and working like a dog. And I was like, yeah, great. And I was like, wait, is that it? So like, I guess, what is the realization point, or how do you listen to that voice that tells you you're kind of maybe on the right path? Because it can be difficult to forge your own path. It's not like it suddenly becomes easy and everything is super flowy or anything. There can be a uh, real shit show, like going through that process. And I think it's because, like you said, of how we're kind of educated one way, and so we have to kind of unlearn or undo a bunch of thinking, and that's really, there's no guide for that. So yeah, maybe just your own process. Maybe how do you suggest going about that for people?
Yeah, I mean, I always, when people ask me that question in personal conversation, I refrain from giving very specific advice, because I don't think that I can completely, like, people usually take it then as some sort of pronunciation, and then, okay, you need to do this specific thing. So what I usually tell them is that I tried something out and worked for me, but they should definitely make their own choice and decisions, and sort of gauge whether something works or not. And so, for example, I don't tell people drop out of university, because I don't think that that's a universally valid advice. It's more about, I think, figuring out how much of the structures in your life, the habits, the norms, the ideas that you have are your own, and not to be completely satisfied with a working path or a working system, and always trying to find a way to internalize and to make stuff that comes at you, that you do, your own. And so I think it's less important to even like pursue a weird path. That you don't have to pursue a weird path to have a worthwhile path. Like, there are very nice things about kids, wife, regular career, like the simple things that people have been doing for millennia. So it's not about being eclectic either, but it is about making sure that you're not following a script that somebody else has written, that you don't realize is against you, is working against your best interests. And also, there are differences in how people, like the capacities that people bring to the table. Some people are very eclectic, are very eccentric, are very interested in sort of pursuing the weird, the curious, the edge type thinking. Not everybody is like that. And so if you then give people the advice that they should pursue everything that's fringe or outside conventional thinking, they might jump in over their head and find that it gives them a brain freeze, and they sort of drop dead and can't sustain that weirdness over time. But they can't return to normal consensus reality either, because they are now red-pilled and they can't go back. So it's sort of this, this really.
You're going to get stuck there at some point, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you can work your way out of that. But I guess our systems, our economic system and our education system is already so far gone that a lot of people, they're sort of unplugged from the matrix, and they want to go back, like the one character in the Matrix who like actually makes the pact with the machines to go back. I want to be oblivious again to reality of the world, and because it's just too much, I can't deal with it. So yeah, that's sort of how I would approach that.
I think that because education kind of funnels you into a very specialized route, right? Like that's what industry created education for, if you look into the origin of it. So it's not really designed to like bring out what is your unique, creation or value you can offer to the universe, but like how can you serve industry? And so you kind of get funneled into, like I was funneled into being a computer engineer, and that was just something I was good at because I was good at left brain stuff, and I wasn't particularly enjoying it, but I just knew I could do it easily and I could make good money because I looked at the salary tracks and all that kind of stuff. So you just get funneled from a very young age, right? You have these career fairs at school when you're 14, 15, 16, and it's like, what job do you want to have? And if you pick the wrong job, then they just tell you, no, I think you picked the wrong job. So it's I guess trying to like link it to a direct monetization is also quite stressful, and maybe that's where it's good to have a conventional option for you while you figure out what else it is you enjoy about life, because not everything's going to have a direct route to monetizing, and it can take time to really master something so that you can, offer it as a service. Like, I'm getting quite deep into health now, and it's not something I could have done 5-10 years ago to open up a health business or be a coach or something. I'd just be like everyone else, kind of regurgitating mainstream knowledge, and it's not super useful. So now, like, I've gone quite deep in that road, and I feel like I could actually offer that if I wanted to the world, and I'd have some mastery over it. So that mastery kind of takes time, and I think maybe the concept of mentoring someone or being under someone to learn that as an apprentice and having a craft that you pick up and you learn, that's kind of very undervalued today. Like, you see it in some professions like plumbing and stuff like that, where you take a craft and a trade and you learn it, and then you go out and you can do it. So there are some sort of tracks outside of conventional university, and I think that specialization of labor is just another thing, that we're all very diverse people. We all have a rich variety of things we enjoy doing and spending our time on. So the fact that we're told to spend 9-10 hours a day doing one thing to earn money is like super one-dimensional part of us, and it's just never gonna work. I mean, you have to switch your whole brain off and your whole curiosity and your whole passion for life and just put it to one side for the whole waking day, and then maybe you get an hour or two in the evening to explore who you are after work. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, right? So yeah, that's definitely some of my frustrations. I don't know if anyone else has similar stories. I think Lynn, go over to you, Lynn.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I guess, more. It's like what you said earlier makes sense. It's not, you're not giving direct instruction on what someone should do. But what do you think are the soft ways or techniques or methods that someone could use? Like I said, Michael was saying, you've worked 8-10 hours, getting to a point in your life, and something's triggered it to the point of thinking, oh, is this it? I mean, what are the sort of soft, subtle things you think that someone could do to gradually bring themselves to the point of being able to break free?
Right. Well, I really like the idea that Taleb proposes for going about this, which is called the barbell strategy, which basically is what Michael said. It's having something that gives you stability, so the safe bet, the thing that keeps you alive at the bare minimum, and that you don't really have to put in much mental energy to sustain. So it could be like a cashier's job, or like, I don't know, bouncer, like whatever it is that gives you some income, and that gives you some ideally also time actually to, for example, listen to podcasts or whatever, maybe even think for yourself, not having to do lots of things with other people, but then use that as the stability thing, and then everything else you put into experimentation and learning and meeting people and going to meetups and playing around with ideas and like getting to know yourself, and that's I think sort of a very generalized strategy. And I think the strategy he also doesn't only talk about it in terms of your career path, but also in terms of investment, for example. It's this idea of putting 80% of what you have and like very stable, very likely to not completely depreciate assets, and then 20% or whatever it is, 5%, however you want to switch it, into super risky things, like things that are unlikely to turn out well, but if they do, they'll sort of go through the roof. And so that way you minimize your exposure to downside. So like you have a large part of your portfolio will be sort of safe, even though of course nothing is safe ultimately. Sure. But then you have the potential to like get the 100x in a sense. So this like applies across domains in life. I like that general approach a lot. And yeah, for me personally, I've definitely applied the strategy. Like right now, for example, I am sort of employed, or rather contracted through my company to various ventures that need my skills. And so I do like some things on a 3-month basis, like with a couple of hours a week, that gives me an income that actually is quite enjoyable work, and that will build my portfolio of projects that I can show to other people. And then in the free time that I have, I'm getting coached by somebody. I'm also using the time to journal, for example, about what I want my life to look like in 5 years, and to play around with projects that I have with my friends. We did this Volta project now, where we have taken people to a sort of retreat type thing, and taken them through ice bathing and all this stuff. So that's sort of how I approached that and actually implemented in my own life.
That's nice, because funny when you said about, it gives you more free time, kind of what you were describing is what we've kind of indoctrinated on at school level to fear. Like, if like subconsciously, when you're an adult, I might as well be working with this time instead of, I making money, getting that currency, instead of exploring your own humanity, exploring the world, what else is out there. It's like, well, if I'm going to be at home, I might as well go to work. And I've heard colleagues say that as well in the past. I've probably said it as well. So it's interesting having to retrain and rewire yourself to go, sometimes just sitting down, looking out the window isn't the worst thing in the world, or doing something else, or just going for a walk, like you say, trying something, going to random meetups. I like that. That sounds actually practical and something that someone could bring in. No, thanks for that.
Right, and I think one thing that's often forgotten is also just resting. Like Michael talks a lot about, not filling your day with all kinds of productive things. So I really don't like this direction that a lot of the productivity scene has taken, this sort of hustle porn, like always busy, always something on your mind, always feeling like you need to act. Like it's very helpful to get you over the initial hump of actually being able to pursue something, but then what's the point of doing all that if all you're doing is just activity for the sake of activity? And I think a lot of the time it's actually not because it makes you more productive that people are doing this, but because they need to justify to themselves or to others that they're spending their time in a worthwhile manner.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it's worthwhile bringing in some of those subtleties that you guys are talking about, like in regards to keeping yourself busy, and like the difference between forging your own path and forcing your own path. And so as I get deeper into this in my own journey, I realize more and more that like the way that works for me in regards to creation or creating the life that I want is less about making it happen and more about allowing it to happen through me. And so just those little tweaks of, leads to a more joyful life versus, making it happen and filling up my time for the sake of filling it up. And as you go through these different stages of, starting your own business and getting more sovereignty, you start to find that you're able to discern to a greater degree through the experience that you have, like what Michael was saying with his health journey. As you get further along that path, you're able to discern more. But then there's also a point where you have the freedom to fill your day with what you want, and what are you going to fill it with? Do you then go and fill it with sort of covering things up, or do you fill it with things that are just keeping you busy, or are you filling it with things that you genuinely love? Are you actually forging your own path, or are you kind of going down more rabbit holes because you think it's going to make you happy? And as you kind of peel back those layers and discern more about like what you say, Maurice, it's about knowing yourself, then that forging of your own path becomes more fluid and becomes more regenerative and sort of keeping like step by step in alignment with your highest good, instead of like these big kind of spikes and crashes of like make it happen, bro, and then burn out or go down a different path and these kind of things. So there's some real subtleties in there, and just that kind of like the way in which we think about ourselves and treat ourselves during that process as we get more of that freedom to make those decisions is really important. Because it's pretty easy to say to people like when other people give advice, like just fill your day with things that like keep you happy and vibrant and all these kind of things. And it's like, you can go surfing all day, or you can, create new businesses, or you can go and donate, or you can be a volunteer. But unless it's like what you really want to do, you're just going to be churning the wheels, and it's sort of, there's really no way around that unless like outside of having that direct experience, listening to what's coming up and not separating those different parts of yourself that you're uncomfortable with, like being okay with what shows up, being comfortable with not having all of the answers, and that's that kind of striving for truth all the time as well. It's like it's okay to to have that moment to moment truth and to keep the mind slippery in the paradox of it all without knowing what your path is all of the way. Like it's part of that mystery as well. So just wanted to bring some of those subtleties into it, because especially in the men's space, there's quite a lot of like control the mind, make it happen. If you're not already successful, then you just haven't worked hard enough, and all these kind of things. And I'm finding the more that I do less, the more that happens, and the more that I let go and the more that I trust myself, the more my world unfolds.
Yeah, I can confirm that that's also happening for me. I wanted to bring up this. I mean, there's a way that I like that the holochain world is framing a lot of sort of ways that systems work well and sustainably. And I think we ourselves are a good example of that, which is the sort of upward spiral idea. Like I've been talking yesterday for a long time with my friend who's writing a paper on sort of a new paradigm for life intelligence and everything else. And one of the resources that came up in my mind while we were talking about this was this upward spiral idea. And the idea is that in order for any system to stay alive and to grow and to sort of transform and get better and stay adapted to its environment, it needs to take care or make sure that the underlying layers on which it rests are taken care of. And so the same applies, I think, to your mind and to your own sort of self-worth and efficacy, that you make sure that all the basics are covered in a sense, and that you're continuously making sure that that stays that way, so that then energy can get freed up to direct to the sort of higher purposes. I think there's also sort of an idea that goes the opposite way, that people actually have never, like the most genius people have never started at the bottom satisfying all their needs first, but actually start at this top of the Maslow hierarchy with the spiritual needs first, and then sort of work their way down. Like some of the most creative and most accomplished people actually start with all the belonging needs, etc., and then work their way back to stability from there. So I found that interesting idea as well. And one more thing I wanted to mention here is also the idea of the talent stack, which is a very practical way of sort of going about building your efficacy, your ability to you hone your agency and to stay to develop yourself. And this idea comes from Scott Adams, the famous creator of the Dilbert comic. I hope everybody knows this one. It's a genius comic, and he was able to create it because he spent, I think, like 15 years or something like that in corporate America, in the banks and like in offices basically. And so the whole comic is about this one character just has to deal with the vagaries and trials and tribulations and frustrations of regular office life, with the dumb trends and the buzzwords and the bosses who are stupid and all these kind of ideas. And so he developed, like, he has a very acute sensibility for what that environment is like. He took that, added one skill, which was to be able to draw well enough that somebody can understand the idea you're trying to portray. He doesn't even describe himself as a good cartoonist, just good enough that he can draw it. And then based on that, he built a whole following, and this cartoon is now syndicated across all the nation, etc. And then he used that and added another skill, speaking. So then he started to get invited to all kinds of companies and conferences and gave speeches, which gave another income stream. Then he added social media skills. So now he's like this media empire that basically does news and commentary and analysis from his bedroom with just his phone and like a whiteboard. And he's basically stacked these skills on top of each other. And the important part here is that these skills are not disconnected, but they all sort of reinforce or complement each other, so that you get sort of multiplier effects from having things that work together.
That's a pretty nice example again of like forging your own path, totally unconventional. There's no career fair or job fair that's going to tell you how to make it like that. And he took his observations. So like I think that's a very key point, is you can observe around you what's happening in the world, and you can see there's all kinds of problems. And if you can just find a way to solve problems for yourself, then you're probably going to be able to solve problems for other people, and that can be a real way of like tapping into a need. And then when it comes to making money, I mean, it's just a matter of how many people you can serve and how much value you can spread, right? So Mark Zuckerberg has billions of people using his platform, so he's a billionaire. It's kind of obvious. And you don't have to be a billionaire. You just have to serve people's needs, and you, by solving your own problems, you can tap into that. So I think paying attention to observation is really key, and you're not always going to know how it's going to monetize. It's just you have to be curious enough to keep observing and keep learning, and that will take you down a path. So it's just letting it unfold and not always knowing where it's going to go. I think like what Nick was saying about like you're never going to have all the answers, and so we're so obsessed about like needing certainty and knowing where things are going that we'll just fill our day out with doing just because that's all we are comfortable with. And like not doing and just being is almost like you'll freak out because you've never been in that state for long enough. And that really will bring up all kinds of, you know, feelings, thoughts, emotions that taps you into deeper parts of yourself. So if you never give space for that, and then you see it all the time with entrepreneurs, like it's just like you said, it's productivity. It's like got to stay busy, because the second you're not busy, you're like, well, what is my life about? Is there meaning? And that is just too depressing for some people to look at for too long. So I think that right. For me, it was, the breakthrough is just like having time freedom. And I had enough money coming in. I wasn't a billionaire. I was just enough to pay the bills. And I just stepped back and thought, do I really want to spend another 5-6 hours every day on my business just to build it up to the next 10K, 20K, 50K a month, whatever the next goal is? Because there's always some Grant Cardone telling you to 10x your business. And like, you know, it's easy to get caught up in that kind of hype, because that's how we derive a lot of meaning, is just to how much money we're making. That's our status, right? So that's how we compare. So like not needing any of that to compare, and being comfortable enough and like having enough to get by, then the extra time can go into feeding all those other parts of yourself, and really just stop doing as much and giving a lot of time in your day. Like I have 0 calendar invites in my week apart from this one with you guys. That's it. I have no one else I need to speak to regularly. I don't care. I just don't care. So, you know, it gives so much time for me to feel and be and explore other things. And it's great. Like it's much better than when my schedule was full and I had calendar invites with lots of people trying to sell them deals or whatever it is I was doing at the time. So it's, I mean, it's a different way of being. It's not for everyone, for sure.
Yes.
There's not a whole lot of point in swapping one hamster wheel for another one, you know, like if we're talking about things like sovereignty or forging your own path, and you're on the corporate ladder, and then you end up, you know, creating your own ladder of the next financial goal or the next business or whatever it is. You know, it's like exactly what you're saying. One way to frame it that's easy for me is going from one hamster wheel to another. And it's sort of, you might be making a step in the right direction from getting out of the corporate ladder, but if you're just recreating the same system, then you're not really free.
Yeah, I really like that hamster wheel analogy. That's exactly how it felt when I quit my job. I was super burned out in the corporate world, and I managed to, you know, find a way to make money online. So I quit, and then I started doing the same thing again, and I realized, wait, what's going on? So, you know, it's just kind of a very unconscious behavior that we are taught to set our time very poorly and set our energy very poorly. And the thing that Nick said before was also spot on about regenerative. If your life is regenerative, you will everything multiplies. It's not about the amount of money in your bank account. You can be making more money, but if your lifestyle is not regenerative, you're just running down your clock, and then you're just burning yourself out. And then what's the point? You can't enjoy any of it. So the primary thing, like Ritz, you were kind of saying Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, working from the top down. If you can sort of sidestep where you can take care of your basic needs, so you're not stressing and worrying about life, and you can take time to really look at the other parts of your being, I think that, you'll stop running down your clock as fast and, you know, burning yourself out and like trying to be productive, and you can give that time for yourself to look at other parts of yourself.
Yes, totally.
Just on that point, the whole productivity thing, just something that is coming up for me is that the more that I allow that space in my life to be, I find that I'm more productive anyway. And it's just like, you know, when people talk about flow state, if you don't have all like these things going on in your mind or thoughts or all these places you have to be and all these things you have to do, and you're constantly churning over all the tasks and kind of hitting goals and all of that, all of these things are taking away from that flow state or simply being. And if you actually want to do it and you're in that moment, you know, like the productivity or the efficiency or whatever is for me, I've found is just far greater anyway. So it's kind of the paradox of it anyway, is like, again, like the less that I do, the more that I do, because I don't have all of these kind of processes going on. I'm just being, and then I'm just, you know, it just happens.
Yeah, I think that's definitely my experience as well, because I do a lot less than I used to, and like sometimes I'll just be outside and doing yoga on the grass, and that's what I'm contemplating. It's just like an exercise, you know, and an idea will come to me, and I'll be able to put these concepts together that just don't come when I'm sitting down in front of my computer, in a low light condition. There's no inspiration in your environment there. Like, people forget your environment is so key, right? So we're just like plugged into this matrix staring at a device, and how much inspiration is really going to come through in that, in that state. I mean, I think we're all kind of godlike creative beings. So there's always inspiration and creativity in us, but our environments are so key. And I think that I get my best ideas outside. So I just spend more time outside. It's kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I think that's also a key component of forging your own path. It's becoming confident and okay with being weird, or sort of having your very idiosyncratic way of doing things that you don't need to justify. Like, we always have this need to justify to other people that we are normal, because we want other people to accept us, to work with us, to give us opportunities, to help protect us from downsides, all these things. But if you get over the initial hump of building a network of people, like not a network of, like, not the sort of weird professional term network, like, oh, I know a lot of people on LinkedIn, like, great, that's not going to do anything for you. But like, actually people who you have a real relationship with, that appreciate the work that you do, or the awareness you bring to conversations with them, or the guidance you provide them, or the information you send them sometimes your way, or something like that. Once you have an initial group of that kind of people, for me at least, I found that my need to justify what I do, sort of in a grand sense, both to myself as well as to society at large, has sort of completely evaporated, because I have always enough people that I can go to get ideas, or to get feedback, or to get jobs. Like, this is one of the really interesting things to me about having like a network of people who are good, cool people. I have completely lost my fear of losing a job, or not getting a job. Like, I don't have job security in the sense of like having a very strong specific skill set that is highly valued at market prices, or following a particularly well-defined career like a doctor, or even having unemployment benefits or something like that. But my job security lies in the people that I know and that appreciate me, and that I can always reach out to say, hey, do you know somebody who could use these skills? Or, hey, do you have a job that I could fit? So that has freed up a lot in me, and allowed me to completely stop feeling like I need to play it safe, and instead just sort of go full on into what I'm doing, in the knowledge that if I falter along the way, I'll always find somewhere to land. And of course, family can help too, but if you don't have a family, that's the next best thing I think you can do to approximate that.
So I guess that's like you're turning the preconceived or ingrained negatives into a positive, right? Because there's going to be things where when you're making this transition, there's going to be things that you've been completely, that even become a part of you, that this is a negative thing, whether it be your interaction with people change, your complete social circle may change. I guess the struggle's got to be trying to find the positives out of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Find the positive, and then figure out the underlying thing that actually gives rise to the phenomenon that you're trying to get. Like, we sort of think, oh, job security, that automatically means this thing. No, job security just means the ability to get a job relatively easily without much effort. And that can be accomplished many different ways. And of course, you can do the same sort of factor analysis or sort of first principles analysis of anything. Like, how do you get a job? Or how do you get a job that you don't look qualified for? For example, I've played around with that. For example, I've created a pitch deck, a personal pitch deck that I send to jobs or to companies that I apply to, where I actually visually show what I've done and what my skills are, and sort of what the results are that I've generated for other companies. And that immediately gets their attention, because nobody does that. Nobody takes the initiative to think sort of, okay, what can I do to stand out from the crowd? And then when I go into the interview, I don't just go in sitting there like, oh, please give me a job, but it's more, I've done my research on the company. I have, as I understand what they're about, I've maybe even done some research that they themselves haven't done on competitors or on a market opportunity or something like that. And then I present them a plan of what I will do in my first 2 weeks in the job. And then, oh, so like this is a person who has initiative, who has an awareness of where the leverage opportunities lie for creating value. And then also, if that's still not enough, or if they're still struggling to accept that, I can make a bet with them and say, if like I'll work for you for free for the first week or for the first 2 weeks. If you like afterwards, so it's sort of taking this entrepreneurial thinking to the job or sort of professional space where you're not necessarily an entrepreneur, but you're acting like an entrepreneur in the regular job environment. And I think that's something that's very hard for people to get to, especially when they come out of school and sort of all their life has been structured for them by other people. And so for me, it took a long time to get over that and to bring all that into myself and to feel confident to be able to do that. And it's actually one thing that I'm trying to teach my brothers, who are all younger than me, to not feel so afraid of approaching companies and sort of offering value and be much more, forthright and taking initiative in approaching people and making opportunities happen rather than waiting for them to happen to you.
That's really cool. I mean, because the whole point, I guess, of what we're doing and obviously the things you guys bring up is that we're trying to make life have a happy existence, aren't we? Make it a bit more playful, a bit more fun, and all these kind of things where you're coming out of this thing that doesn't feel right, that feels like a grind to you. Even like the way you're approaching people with job interviews. I think I've read countless articles similar to that. I've never done it. I've never done that before. And I thought, oh, that's like a good idea. That might work, but I've just never done it because there was never a part when I was in that process of work and so on. It was never something I was actively thinking, no, I thought, this is the way to do it. This is what they're expecting from me. And the people on the other end, they just want to have a better day as well. They want to have a nicer day, a nicer encounter, a nicer experience. So even changing your game, bringing yourself more joy, probably the very altruistic way of bringing joy to others, right? Being more truly yourself and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Moritz, about having a network is kind of key, because if you don't want to follow the conventional path, you need other options. And so like the other thing is that people tend to take jobs because they don't have options. And so they maybe take something that's not the best thing for them. It's just what's on the table. And because there's not other options on the table, they end up in a job they're not happy with. And so I think the more options you can give yourself, the more confident you feel, as you can set better terms, negotiate better rates for your worth, for your time. And you just don't feel like you have to accept or take something less than what you're worth or what you want to work on. And I think that people are so used to being spoon-fed everything that they come out and they just go down the conventional road of applying for jobs. Like you said, they don't really know how to show value beyond the CV. And so even just what you did about, being proactive about saying what you're going to do for the company shows way more interest and initiative than most companies ever see when they're interviewing people. So like that's the problem today is if you're recruiting and you're trying to find someone who's going to add value to your company, you're just like, well, everyone just wants to be spoon-fed. And so it's rare to see someone that has that initiative and actually thinks out their own, perspective how they're going to add value. And I think that's quite rare. So I mean, the best job interviews I've had is the ones where I felt I was given scope, some autonomy to actually develop the role as well and have some movement and freedom within that role. It's not like so rigid, you're just going to do this all day. So you can get a sense for that when you're in an interview with a potential boss, what kind of relationships that's going to be. And some people just focus on the salary and like that's a progression. I was on 20K and now this job's 30K. My interview, my boss was a dick, but he's given me the job and now I've got 30K now. I mean, it's nuts how much we prioritize that little incremental salary over like, oh, now I've got to work 6 to 12 months with this guy and he's a complete asshole. I mean, I've probably made that mistake a couple of times.
Yeah, that's a great example. Like it's even gotten to the point now where I sometimes feel like I'm interviewing them. Like, do I want to work with you actually? Like, will you be a pain in my ass and just take your regular boss approach to dealing with employees or with the people that are under you, and then just feeling confident also to walk away. And that's, I think, a huge thing as well that we're not taught, negotiation in general. Like, how do you figure out what you're worth? How do you make that clear to the other party, and how do you then actually get the worth that you're bringing? Like, that's also connected again to the idea of how do you get a job that you're on paper not qualified for. Literally the only thing that a company cares about is whether you produce more value than you take out in salary. So if you can make that plausible to them that you will be able to do that, they will want to hire you, unless they're like completely in conventional thinking stuck and can't get out of that. And that's actually when they're shooting themselves in the foot. And then you don't want to work there anyways, because they're not actually open and aware to opportunities that are in their environment. And that means that the company is probably doomed sooner or later anyways, and probably not a good place to work at either. So,
or just soul crushing, which is a lot of corporate machines are very profitable, but very soul crushing as well. I think Emil wanted to say something, so I'll hand over to him.
I just want to try to tie up some ends as well with some of the stuff we've been talking about, because I think a lot of the people who might be listening, and even for ourselves as well, there's some important aspects that most people don't really have to be able to forge their own reality. And that is, first of all, they have never learned how to think for themselves. They've learned what to think through school and through their parents and through the ways that society wants them to go. And then they suddenly end up somewhere that they don't really want to be. And they never really ask themselves, what do I really like to do? And I know a lot of people I've been talking about, they say, oh, you're so brave, you do whatever you want. But they don't even know themselves what they want to do, because they don't have the free time to ever figure out what they want. They do the same as everyone else. They drive the same car as everyone else. They go to the same movies. They watch the same TV series. They do everything. They go skiing if their friends go skiing. They never really explored what they really like doing. And I think the passion you figure out that you have for life is when you really figure out what you like to do. So first of all, I think people need to create the freedom for themselves, and that also means that they might not buy that expensive car or that expensive new TV or go hire an apartment that's way above their budget. So they'll be stuck in the rat race, and they can never find time to not work, or to schedule down their work to maybe 3 days a week, or even they don't even have the confidence to ask their boss to lower their weekly hours, because they have to earn that money to suit the lifestyle that they created for themselves, that they really don't like, but what society has told them that this is how you have to do it. So I think, probably the first step would be creating that freedom by probably starting to lower your expenses for most people, because a lot of people, they spend so much money on shit and they don't need it. They think they need it because they're sucked into all the ads that they watch on TV or through Facebook, or they just kind of feed into this lifestyle that everyone else has. So I think there's this little switch that needs to happen, that you have to wake up out of that, start figuring out, what do I really need to be happy, to what kind of food do I need to eat, and all these small things. Could I find a smaller apartment? Start with that, because then you create a little gap of freedom there where you can have some breathing room to do what you actually like, or figure out what you actually like. And I know for me, I was kind of like what you said, Michael, on the career ladder, and I was just building businesses, and I was super, super busy. I never really stopped and said, why am I doing this? What do I really like doing? And it wasn't until I got so stressed that I kind of was in bed for 2-3 weeks, and I just thought about what I want to do. And I started traveling, and I started learning about myself, what I like to do, and what I think life should be about. And that's super important. Without that, I don't know where I've been. Probably some corporate job, still hating my life. So I think that's a really good start. You kind of lower the expenses a bit, create the freedom, and then take it from there. Because without that first little step, there's nothing you can do. I know people who have children, and they never even have time for themselves. The time they have, they're so tired that you scroll on Facebook for the last few hours before bed. They don't even learn about anything new, or they don't have anything. They don't have that little extra buffer to go explore a new subject or read a book about something, because there's not enough capacity to take it in, because it's filled with stuff.
I think that's kind of the brutal reality of where a lot of people get stuck. So that's always a good idea when talking about these concepts, is like, where do people get stuck? And like what we're talking about is all nice and grand, and yes, but how do I get there, and where I'm actually from, where I actually am right now. And I think that, like what you said, a very practical thing about cutting back expenses is huge, because it forces you to think about what's valuable to you. And people just don't value their time. That's really what it comes down to. When you're spending a bunch of shit on things you don't need, and you're having to go work the next day for that job, and keep working the next day and the next day for 30-40 years, you just don't value your time, because you're spending it on shit you just don't need. And so why do people get to that point where they don't value themselves enough? I mean, that's a very deep conversation. We can go down that rabbit hole as well, but I think a lot of it's just conditioning, right? So when you really value yourself, you realize, oh, I don't need this shit, and now I get an extra hour back in my life. And I think that, again, the conventional career progression is salary, salary, salary. And then when I actually step back and look at it, I realize, oh, great, I'm on 100K, 150K. but I'm working twice the hours now. So I'm actually on the same hour salary I was back in that old basic job when I had 5 years less experience. And look at the managers above me; they're working even longer hours and spending even less time with their families. So it's like you can see where it's going if you just look around you, look at the people that are 10 years further ahead of you down that career track. Is that where you want to be? Because they're not necessarily happy, and they don't take care of their health, or they don't value their time. You know, they have all the same challenges. So life only gets more busy in that sense of distractions or things like debt. You know, maybe you're only responsible for yourself, and then you get married, then you get a mortgage, and you have kids, and you have more obligations, and all those things. It just takes away from being able to feed yourself, and putting that value back on yourself. So it comes back to your day being regenerative or not. Are you running down your clock? And you know, I measure this with like health and biomarkers and stuff to kind of get a view on that. But how you feel, just how much energy you have, will determine how much you can get done. And if you're too tired at the end of the day, you can just sit down and veg out in front of Netflix or scroll on Facebook because you've got no energy left. Then something is wrong, like with your diet, with your environment, with your whatever, you know, what you've been doing the whole day has not inspired you. So there's lots of key feedback things, but people just like to tune that out because, yeah, looking and questioning your lifestyle can be quite depressing. And especially if I'm around you doing the same way, then it's like, well, if I change, then, you know, I'm going to be the weird one that doesn't fit in anymore. And I think that also is a lot of inertia for people. It's like, you have your circle of friends, you go to the pub after work, that is your life, it's comfortable enough. And so it's like, if there's not enough pain in some aspect, things don't change. And so for me, the breaking point was, it just got really freaking painful, like at work, working stupidly long hours, having no time to myself. Like, I think in Asia, the work hours are just ridiculous, right? So I was in Singapore, and I was like coming from London. I thought working in London was a hard lifestyle. And I moved to Singapore. I was like, nah, damn, these Asians, they work like crazy. So I'm definitely not cut out for this. And I still had a limited time span, and I could never stick it out there for longer than a couple of years. So that was great for me, right? Because that was the pain threshold I needed to get pushed over to question things.
I think Emil is pointing to something very important, though, like sort of finding the ultimate concern is sort of one term that I like to use, which is basically, what do you really care about? Like getting to the depth of the foundations of where do you want to go and what matters to you, and then building up from there, or I guess down from there, depending on how you want to see it. Actually, one very concrete thing that you can do is, of course, journaling. I do that as well. But there's actually, people often have a hard time. Oh, how do I journal? Like, do I answer questions? They struggle with a blank page because they have never actually encountered their own mind and actually are scared to play around with their own mind. So one thing that I recommend people, that I did actually in Brazil about 2 years ago now, I think, was to do the self-authoring suite that Jordan Peterson has put out. It's at selfauthoring.com. I also put it into the map that we're creating. And that's basically a whole sort of structured writing program that you can take. You pay like, I don't know, $10 or something like that, just sort of a symbolic amount, so that you actually value it yourself and don't just get into it and then never do it. And then you go through a series of questions on your past, a series of questions on your present, and a series of questions on your future. And so what you end up doing that way is you're sort of reliving and working through what is in your past and how that determines where you are currently and what the stories are that you tell yourself about how you got here. Then about the present thing is about like, okay, what is my current status? Like actually taking stock of where you are and seeing what you like about it and what not. And then future authoring is about envisioning both a hell to run away from. Like if your bad habits and your vices were to sort of iterate over time and just get worse and worse and worse, where would you end up? And everybody knows where they would end up, and everybody sort of a bit unique in that way. Like, for example, I would probably be at home in my bed watching Netflix for 10 hours a day, listening to podcasts, like ordering takeout food, and never meeting anybody. And then once you have that hell to run away from, actually having visualized it, and then you also construct a heaven to run towards. So like, what would happen if my virtues were to grow and to overcome my vices? And what do I actually want? Like, do I want to have a family? Do I want to pursue a high-powered career? Do I want to have as much free time as possible? And so once you've gone through that and also put those different goals and relationships to each other, you get a much better sense, not only sort of on an intellectual knowledge level of what matters, but also on a, like, oh, I actually can see myself being there And that will come up again and again in everything that you do, where those sort of associations are triggered. Like something that the Stoics figured out a long, long time ago is to like optimize your cognition by basically running through negative scenarios of what could happen if, for example, lost all, and then figure out, oh, I could actually be still okay, even if I lost everything, my family, my fortune, whatever. And like emperors did this stuff to keep themselves grounded. And then also to like envision, okay, what are the opportunities that I could reach and exploit if I were to like be at my best. And so what you're doing that way, you're building all these neuronal connections and associations in your brain that then when you encounter something, you see a pattern, because we're pattern matching machines, basically. That whole association cluster pops up. And like, oh yes, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I want to pursue this path. So, because otherwise we always have this sort of we're always tempted to stray away again from it, because we don't value our time, because we don't value our goals and our values very much. And so you need something sort of to remind you of that in the moments of temptation and of sort of lacking discipline.
Yeah, it's like model building to give you a strong why, and that keeps you focused. I think that's what we all are missing in school, right? No one gives you that why, so we're kind of directionless. Yeah, I think Ollie wanted to say something.
Yeah, the whole idea of, I like what you're saying about breaking things down so that you can really figure out what to do and what to do next. I do think that the whole problem that many people have is, you know, of course, all these things that we're talking about and going out and being productive and valuing your time, fantastic things. But many people really sort of struggle so much with what to do, you know? And I think that the key, you have to have this balance between the 2 points. Some people think that you have to have a thing. You don't, obviously. But if you don't have a thing, then many people become very directionless. And I think that the key really is in, you know, pain points. And what Emil was saying about reducing your need to consume and to reduce your consumption. I just think there are many sort of interesting discussions that one can have about that, because how do you really, because, you know, for example, I know that I've never done it, but I know the Jordan Peterson self-authoring thing. And I know that some people would find that very interesting. I also suspect many other people would find it, well, I don't want somebody to kind of, in some sort of unknown psychological capacity, sort of tell me how to think and what to do, you know? People want to have this sort of, even if it's just symbolic, a means of figuring out themselves what they want to do. And it's the hardest thing for many people, because they break away from the status quo and then they move into a new value system. And they don't really realize at first that it's someone else's, you know, and they skip again and again and go from position to position. And so I think that the key is to really sort of minimize, just to do something, but to sort of minimize more and more what you don't need from your life. Otherwise, the pain point will come to you. And I think that's kind of what Stoicism is about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Like that's actually what Taleb also calls via negativa. Like the idea of, instead of adding more things to your life, adding more complexity, it's cutting away things. Like we are talking about this with consumption, reducing consumption, where it's also like, oh, maybe I should cut away sugar, or maybe I should cut away this person, or maybe I should cut away this particular interest. Like cut away, so that it actually becomes simpler, becomes more manageable. You don't feel overwhelmed by all the things that are coming at you, and that your life is sort of drawing you into different directions. And then from that sort of basis of stability, you can then add things again.
Yeah, and I think if you're forging your own path, oh, sorry, Ollie, I was just going to say, if you're forging your own path, then you have to remember the people around you who aren't forging theirs are going to pull you back into their reality and their beliefs. Yes. And that's a huge thing that just creates so much inertia.
Yeah, big time. I think that, you know, as sort of, I think people are going to become more and more sort of self-branded entrepreneurial as things move forward, and that ability to be agile is really critical. But to do that, it requires a lot of grounding, you know? And so it's just something that you But the sooner you can encounter that, then the better. You can that through that process is how you'll actually determine your own meaning. People talk about failing forward so much, and then it kind of becomes fetishized, and then people sort of tumble into sort of doing a crap job and then not taking responsibility for it, within their own lives. But I definitely think sorry, I'm hopping around a bit there. What I'm trying to say is that the idea of moving away from kind of a group consensus thing and becoming more individual and entrepreneurial in today's world is kind of the only way to answer that question that you're asking there of being pulled back by other people.
Yeah,
it's to get enough autonomy to be able to reschedule your life so you can strip out things. Otherwise, it's just filled with someone else doing work for someone else. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? If you're working for someone else, then a large chunk of your day is taken up, and then you have less time for yourself. So if you could reschedule that, like, so you have the time freedom, and then you can strip things out, then you really just have a lot of space, and things can come into that space. And I think that not having everything planned out applies to a lot of other aspects of life. Like, we used to travel a lot, and we used to like book our flights ahead, for months to try and save on flights and stuff. And so we'd know where we're going to be for months ahead at a time. And I stopped doing all that recently in terms of just stripping out. I just said, I don't even know where I'm going to be next week or next month. I just literally live a month by month. And then I book a flight. If an opportunity comes up, I'm not locked into a reality or a future, so I could just take advantage of it. And I think the less locked into something you are, the more opportunities can come to you, and the more you can see them, because they're always there, but the more you can see them and actually act on them. And I think that's been huge for me recently, is like just stripping away everything of like what I think I know, where I think I need to be, trying to save a few $100 on flights by booking months in advance. Like, we enjoy traveling, but we just don't do that style anymore. And then something comes up and I'm like, great, I want to do that, I want to go there, I want to visit this guy. And I'm not feeling locked into anything. So that definitely gives you that freedom.
I think that we're also underestimating how tied people are to different things or places or circumstances, and that not everybody can or wants to have that freedom to move so much around. Like, there's something about sort of nomad or digital, or like sort of, I guess, crypto bourgeoisie that we sort of belong to that is not necessarily normal or completely able to be done by everybody. I think that's important to recognize. Like, lots of people are much more tied to a particular place or sort of to particular investments, maybe having a house. Like, and of course, you can sell your house and you can move around. That's great. If you want to do that, that's great. But I think that we also have to give credence and due to lifestyles that aren't based on sort of moving around and maximizing your freedom of action in place and sort of travel, but actually building something worthwhile in one place. Actually,
yeah,
I like you wrote. I like something that you wrote, Michael, about this idea of having like when a man and woman sort of marry or like have a relationship, that they then pursue the strategy of the woman working the normal job or like having a regular career that gives the stability to the two of you, to be able for the man to then pursue sort of very risky or not very stable pursuits that could turn out very well for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience, actually, because when all the obligations were on me to make the money, then I didn't have the mental capacity to think of other things, to give myself the space and time. So when my wife, got a job and could bring in the income that we were running it on our savings, then I had time to go and take a lot more risk and just to be a lot more free and creative. And that creativity just flowed through my life like never before. When I'd always had to be the one making the money in a job or in a business. So I think that's huge for couples, for partners, you can really help each other, support each other that way. And it's just based on theory that men are hardwired to take more risks, because that's how we're genetically, bred as hunters, and we go off and fight, and women are more like the gatherers, who have a more stable, they don't enjoy taking risks as much. I think they can, but it's not necessary for most women. It's broadly speaking, most women don't enjoy that as much, and maybe men are the better ones to go and take those risks. So it's kind of like what Nassim Taleb was saying about stacking as barbell, but as a couple, just applying that logic to the modern context. But yeah, I think there's a lot of ways we can go with this. Nick's got his hand up, so I'll pass it over to him.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie in a few things like Emil did earlier. So, like I think what some of you guys are talking about is that creative capacity instead of the reactionary space. So as we strip away those things in our life that are taking up our mental capacity or our energetic capacity, and it frees ourselves up to be more creative, then that then allows us to be in a state of being instead of reacting. And then we're sort of like what Emil was touching on earlier, as we get to know ourselves and we start to ask ourselves those deeper questions about what we really want, we're then more in a state of creation as well. And then like what Moritz was talking about, especially in the online entrepreneurial digital nomad space, there is that romance of bouncing around. And myself, I lived for about 5 years of booking one-way tickets, and there is that living your highest excitement and traveling and getting deep experience and learning new cultures and learning new languages and living that life that you want from a space of freedom or, you know, self-inquiry. But then there can be a point, at least for me in my experience, of as you build those foundations and you stabilize and you create that life that you want and you start to design that life from a more whole space, you know, do you want a home? Do you want multiple homes? Do you want to spend some time in one country or another? Do you want to keep on traveling month to month? Is it your highest excitement to just keep on moving month to month? And it may well be, or it may be that it's another one of those things that fills you up, so you're not still enough to actually listen to those kind of core foundational things. And I've found in me that it was very, very difficult for me to actually stay in one location and to actually build a home. It was much easier for me to seek out another experience, to go and have another ayahuasca ceremony, to go and do another like initiation and feel like I'm progressing or deepening my knowledge, or, you know, going to another sacred site or doing another course or doing another retreat. But actually, at least at the moment, at the phase I'm going through, I'm finding that kind of stillness and that being in a grounded kind of creating that home space is what's allowing me to really flourish, because I'm actually fully with who I am more. And you know, some people might drink a lot of alcohol just as someone else might travel to the next location to escape whatever it is. So that, you know, there's that full circle of, you know, that digital nomad space and you know, what's really in our highest good.
Yeah, I love that. That's really a big point. Like this constant running for something or running away from something. There's this beautiful quote that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote. I don't know exactly what it was like. It was something like, "My giant goes with me wherever I go." Like, people have this idea that they can travel to new locations, like completely transform them. And like, there's this whole phenomenon of people after university or after school traveling to India to find yourself. And then they're completely confounded when they just lose themselves more because nobody has the answers for them. Or they go into something so completely that they get lost and actually lose their roots again because some of this new thing takes over their entire personality. And so being mindful of whether you're running away from something by sort of bombarding yourself with novelty and with cool things that's a dangerous thing to stay unconscious of. So if you become conscious of that, then you can use it to advantage, like get more stuff coming, but not have it be this new pattern that you then fall into that actually becomes its own hamster wheel, even though it feels better in some way.
Yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons to that. And like you said, probably at different phases of life, you enjoy different things more. So when you're younger, you're more that adventurer, that explorer type of person, and you will benefit from that novelty, right? You'll enjoy traveling if you can. For me, it was always my passion to travel because I couldn't much when I was young because we were poor. And so when I had the ability and I had the time freedom, I mean, I just went off and traveled and I just loved it for years. but it can definitely burn you out in that sense and just keep you busy if you're not regenerative. So like I didn't always have a nice space to work out and do my yoga on the grass in all the places. And so keeping some stability and routine is nice if you can do that just to center and ground yourself. And so actually this is the first time in like years where I've got residency somewhere in a country because I know I'm going to probably have a base here. And it's just, it gives me all those things that feeds me. That's why I need. So after a lot of travel, you get a lot of contrast and a lot of direct experience to know what you like, what you don't like, and you've just got to get to that point where you feel, you're more sure, or if sure as you can be of what it is you need to feed yourself. So like for me, I need sunlight, I need some stability. I don't want to be traveling every month unless I want to. So what I was saying about clearing my schedule is it doesn't mean I'm going to be traveling a lot. It just means something comes up. I know I can go there and do it. I'm not locked in because I've tried to save a few $100 on a flight in 6 months or something like that, which is how we kind of used to do it, which is, is fine for that phase as well. But I think we're all go through different phases. And so like, if you need to travel because that's what feeds you, it gives you that novelty. I mean, that's how we're kind of born. I love how Terence McKenna talks about novelty versus habit, because I think that really drives a lot of human behavior. You either fall into habit and then you lose the curiosity in life and the novelty, but the novelty can also push you over the edge, right? If you're taking drugs all the time and going and partying and, it becomes a habit as well, but the novelty can also burn you out. So you got to find that sort of middle ground. And I think, maybe it's just as you get older, you get better at knowing yourself better.
I feel that that makes a lot of sense. I feel that for me, the shift in kind of moving more towards that kind of thinking, and also to what Moritz was saying, is kind of moving away from seeing things as products, because people see products as products, they see experiences as products. I know it sounds very hippie-esque, but they see themselves as products. They like, oh, I did Berlin, or I did ayahuasca, or something like this, and it becomes a product. It becomes something that you're experiencing through, something that someone else has explained to you, and you're just living vicariously your own fucking experience through someone else's product, sort of productivized or product. It's just something that they've put together for you, and it becomes very, very difficult once you start seeing things in that way to actually have a direct experience of things. And then doubly so to actually know what it is that you want. And so, just wanted to drop that in there.
Yeah, I like I actually dislike the term productivity for that very reason. Like, it's this very, produce, like, make products. I prefer the term generativity, and I also then distinguish that from operativity. So like for me, generativity is sort of this creative capacity of like just playing around with things, giving rise to new things. And then operativity to me is like the way you organize yourself, the way you operate, the way that you structure all your different systems and tools and whatever. So nice.
I don't know if it's too late to bring in a little bit of a different subject onto that, but it came to my mind that there's a lot of talk going on around universal basic income at the moment, and whether it's feasible or not, I'm not going to go into that, but I'm just thinking that imagine that if everyone had the space and time freed up to do whatever they wanted, to be creative, to be an artist, or to go watch the waves for 2 weeks if they wanted to. Imagine the mind power it would open up for everyone to do just that, what we could create out of that. And even with some of all the technology coming now, we have 3D printers that can print from gravel, and you can print your own furniture, and you can upload the files to the internet, and someone in a different country can print the exact same thing by pouring in gravel to his 3D printer and printing his own furniture more or less for free. So we're going to go to this new paradigm in the world where everything is going to be close to free. Because everything can be printed out of nowhere, more or less. And when that happens within a few years, I think there will be so much energy freed up in people's lives that they have to deal with who they are, why they're here, and what they want to do. And when we go to that step, the world will change completely, because people will start doing the most amazing, crazy things that they never had even the time to do, or the need to do, or just a way to do it. So I think that's really, really interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do. It's fascinating because like the world's changing so quickly, but I also think that we're finding better and better ways to fill people and distract people. So I think reality is actually diverging. You've got one class of people or type of people that just going down a certain road of like ever busier, ever more distractions, ever more stress. Even when things become cheaper or freer, there's just another distraction, another video game, another VR, another debt payment. So that this never going to end. That cycle just carries on. But if you can pull back and detach kind of what we're talking about and find ways to question and reduce and not consume as much, then yes, certain things will become a lot cheaper and you have a lot more options. Like you can 3D print a house in the country, you take on a lot of mortgage for that. You just small outlaying, and then you've taken care of your basic needs. So then you're free of like a huge slavery trap for hundreds of years that's been going on, and more recently with mortgages, like where you're just locked into this reality of paying some feudal lord for a piece of land, the right to live somewhere. So I mean, things are going to really change for a lot of people if you have a good passport and you have the mobility and have an education or remote job. I mean, you can live almost anywhere and reduce your costs to very, very low to give you these options we're kind of been talking about. So I think it's going to be really exciting for people listening to this to be able to choose a different path once they have the awareness. And so this is kind of what we're trying to do and spread. It's the whole point of this show.
I think before we get closing, which we are approaching, I will sort of want to give a sort of broader or 10,000 feet view of what Forging Your Own Path is sort of situated, how it is situated in the broader history and sort of frame. So one idea is that actually it used to, like that is normal state of affairs, that people are free agents, that people are pursuing their own ends, and that they're mostly actually working for themselves. That has been what it has been like for most of society, of history. And actually the sort of go learn something, study it, then go into a job and then work your way up. Like that's very new historically. Like it's not the normal. And so we're actually returning to the normal again from what was a very unnormal period of development. And so that should give you some sort of confidence or security in the idea that it's not just sort of everything's going to collapse and we're all going to have to fight for ourselves, but no, that's actually how normal state of affairs is. And it's not everybody fighting for themselves, but it is everybody more working for themselves, having more autonomy in how they structure their day, how they earn their money, etc. That's one thing. And the other is sort of this idea of the creative economy. And the idea of governments and corporations and all these sort of organizations competing for human talent, and having to give you better deals to keep and to attract, keep and sort of keep happy also the talent that they attract. So if you are able to build your skills up and your capacity up, you will be competed for by all these organizations and even jurisdictions. Like we see this now with jurisdictions competing for the crypto industry, with like Malta and Switzerland and Singapore, like these sort of more nimble, more agile countries in a sense, spotting an opportunity and restructuring themselves in an attempt to capture that industry and that interest. And so I think that trend will continue and will actually be democratized further down. Like that used to be just the province of the richest people who could choose where they live and who could choose where they park their money and all those kind of things. Now with the internet driving down the cost of doing all this information gathering and decision making and communication, more and more people will be able to take advantage of that possibility as well. So I think that's actually a very hopeful trend that could see the life of the average person radically improve, because if a government does a bad thing, people will move to other jurisdictions. So yeah,
that's a really good way to look at it. Like collectively, you have nations like that where some are very big and slow and cumbersome. Maybe US and China, two big economies have a lot to lose from crypto, and so they're going to do everything they can to fight it for as long as they can. But the smaller countries are just going to be more nimble, be able to move around and attract and compete for resources and talent. So I think individually that's what's happening too, is you have a lot of people that are kind of trapped, very hard for them to change, and then you have some people maybe more nimble, and so this is just a choice, life choice, where you want to be on that spectrum. And with the world changing so fast, maybe the country you're born in is not the best country to be if you're not offering the best opportunity, and they're in a different part of their cycle. I mean, we're going to have for sure another show about empires and cycles and stuff, but I think this is really relevant to the practical execution of this. Is like, where is your talent going to be best rewarded? And if 50% of your labor is going to support something that's not sustainable, you know, how long can you really live like that? Is that really something you want to be doing? So being aware of your environment again is key, and like where you're operating, and the countries that are going to be more nimble, maybe you're going to be the ones that, you know, attract more talent, and you want to be around other smart people. That might be a good option as well.
Agreed. Would anybody like to say any concluding words? I think we're inching up on the end of our show.
I might want to add a little thing that I've been going through a lot, and I remember talking with both Michael and his better half about it as well when we met in Thailand, that a lot of people like us that are seeking freedom and seeking these alternative realities, I almost want to call them, away from the matrix, outside of the system, and trying to create our own little domains and do what we love and all this. It's not really fitting so well into the mainstream, and what I've been missing a lot, and what I'm still trying to look for, is something like this, where we come together, a lot of people who enjoy some of the same things, share some ideas, but what would be really interesting would be having these kind of people in a community setting where people will live together, not they don't have to live just on top of each other, like very, very close, but just if you have these same people in your near environment, then I think a lot of very, very interesting things can happen. I know people are working on something called Liberland, which is a little bit similar, some of the same thoughts, but probably not as much as some of the other topics we're touching on. But it could just be really interesting to see if there was actually one place in the world that would suit these kind of free-thinking people, and then see what would come out of it in sustainable buildings, in new business ideas, whole new ways of thinking and creating realities and communities and ways of living. I just would find that really interesting to see how that would work out, and it would kind of be the epiphany of everything we're talking about, like creating a whole reality where people could come and live.
Yeah, I think part of the goal for this is definitely to draw that community together from like minds, because we're all spread around, and seeing what opportunities kind of emerge, because things are going to change so much in the next 5-10 years. It's really hard to predict how it's going to end up. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff like Liberland and some of the concepts that are just going to redefine borders and nations for sure. I think Ollie had something he wanted to say after we stopped recording, so I'll keep the call going after we stop recording. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything else to want to add.
I have one last thing I can mention, which is an invitation to come meet me at Refactor Camp 2019 in the States, in Los Angeles. I think it is June 15th to 16th. And the topic of that Refactor Camp is escaping reality. So it's all about consensus trance and manufactured reality, and like building your community, like with the tools for creating communication, economic exchange, etc., becoming more democratized. More and more people are starting to build actual self-sufficient bubbles that can sort of completely detach from the mainstream and operate on their own. So that's, I think, a great place to maybe meet up if you want to go there.
Cool. You have to let us know how that goes if you can't make it. All right, I'm going to hit the stop recording here, and thanks everyone. I'll just stay on the line for a bit and let Ollie say what he wants to say.
Thank you.